Yo, word is up, everybody. It's Arbitrary Day of the Week, and I wanted to talk about solar. Particularly the doom and gloom around solar, particularly, or more so, particularly around Celis Leo, because that's one of the cards people are pointing to. Card that people are pointing to a lot because it's a really awesome looking card, etc. But I think people are kind of overestimating it, or maybe the people on the other side are underestimating. It's a mixed topic for sure. Other powerful cards that people are looking at are like Lestragon and Soul Stocks, which we'll talk about perhaps maybe in another video. This is mostly going to be about Celestleo and a couple of things I wanted to talk about with it. So let's jump into that. Celestleo, it's a 13/10 for 3 solar. You can foretell 4 and add each solar celestial foretold this way to your hand. And then you can destroy cards up to the number of cards you add to your hand this way. So a lot of people look at this card and say, oh, there's a chance that I draw 4 cards off the top of my deck and destroy 4 cards with Celestleo, and then I win the game. That's a possibility. Again, most people will probably realize that that is the outlier. A lot of people will probably say, looking at this card, saying, oh, if I build a solar deck, I'll probably find 2 to 3, and that's still great. Like, getting 3 destructions off this card is going to be amazing. There's, like, consistency tools in solar to get even more cards on top, and that's a fair argument. However, if we look at standard deck building right now, roughly 20 to 23 cards are going to be Elestrals. There's some decks that run as low as 15, so we'll say 15 to 23 is our range. We're playing Celis Leo, so we probably want to have enough cards in the deck to trigger it, so we're probably running 20 at least. 3 of those are probably going to be Ash Rabbit, because Ash Rabbit's that good, you're going to want to add those tools. And let's say 1 or 2 of them may be Lavalets. Now you're looking at 15 cards that can trigger Celis Leo when you play it. So you're looking at less than half your deck, and you go to trigger Celis Leo, you're looking at 4 cards off the top of it, so roughly slightly less than half of those cards, roughly 1.5, will be solar cards. So when this triggers, in a normal kind of current standard deck build, as we know it right now, Celis Leo will draw 2 cards and destroy 2 cards, or draw 1 card, destroy 1 card. In the destroy 1 card, draw 1 card situation, Celis Leo is actually pretty bad. That's basically going the same as like a Centarbor or maybe a Chronodile or other cards that just pop for 1. Like those cards, like specifically Centarbor, don't see play at all, right? So that's not good enough. So then you need to draw 2, pop 2 to, I think, is where this card becomes actually worthwhile, because you're getting card advantage in both hand and destroying cards on field. So there's some RNG randomness associated with this card that I think people are overlooking the consistency of. I think people are also overlooking the deck building restrictions on this card. You want to run Elechick because you want to find Apollos, 1000%. But that's another card that now reduces your chance of finding solar cards. So now you're running Plucky, which is a defensive body that will still find you Apollo, but it's not as good as Elechick. Like, the defensive body is not as good. You know, you're running maybe Corvishines because you want to get that filtering. You're running other solar, like you're running Jertara, which is a fine card. You're running cards that you might want to run something else and another element to splash, like Lavalith. But you have to run the solar to make Celis Leo work. You really do. You really need to kind of say, I'm playing a solar deck and I have to play all these solar Elestrals to make sure that my Apollo and my Celis Leo work. You're probably running a couple Soul Stocks, some Soul Bells to go with the Apollo stuff, so you can go Soul Bell into Soul Stocks to try to get those combos going so that you can potentially use a Soul Stocks to send to Celis Leo and stuff like that. But again, we're running lots of solar Elestrals, so we're forced into the solar deck build. Kind of like how Morphrost forces you to play at least 9 to 12 Morphrost and a bunch of Frost Spirits. Celestleo is forcing you into solar, so your opponent's going to generally know what you're doing. Additionally, how many 3-drops have we see play in Elestrals? 2 competitively ever, Voltempest and Pantera. And Pantera wasn't even the threat. The threat was the fact that Pantera could exist in your deck, so you had to be wary of it, but it never actually was put in the deck because people would just play all the other cards and make you think you had Pantera. Voltempest saw some play in like Thunder Nexus styles, but where Voltempest does get you a win faster in a Nexus deck, it was slightly less consistent because it's the 3-drop you have to ascend into. Voltempest additionally is a hybrid 2 thunder, 1 wind, which allow you to ascend it a little bit more cleanly from a wind or a thunder Elestral. Surprisingly, I find it that Elestrals that need 3 of the same element are actually harder to get to than an Elestral that can use 2 of one and 1 of another, because you're kind of forced, Celis Leo, to be played with multiple solar cards in field, so you're not wasting misenchants to get to Celis Leo, which is another weird little drawback that like Centarbor also has, where we don't see Centarbor being played, even though in theory Centarbor is really good. I think Chronodile is going to be good because of that hybrid water, and water is good at ramping. We don't see ramping in solar outside of special casting into Soul Stocks, and then you're going to Soul Stocks in Celestleo, all of which are extremely weak to Gorgon's Gaze, a 3 of in every deck. Additionally, we now have a smaller Gorgon's Gaze with Dense Fog, which people will probably be running at like 1 or 2 of because there's no Lunar to check it, and it suppresses, so you stop you can effects and you stop passive effects before they can be triggered in response windows. I just don't see Celestleo being that relevant over some other solar options. Again, just playing cows plus Nexus stuff. Celestleo, don't get me wrong, I think Celestleo is good, and Celestleo is probably one of my favorite cards in the set, but I think there's a little bit too much overhype, or not overhype, or over misconceptions on how strong the card is actually going to perform. And example, the Elestrals, in their video, they played Thunder Nexus, the current best deck, let's say, right? And they played against a solar deck using proxies. And we saw Celestleo get out multiple times and just sit on board and blow stuff up, or just sit on board and get Gorgons and do nothing. And there's one game where it sits on board for like 2 or 3 turns. I don't remember exactly how long, but I'm just sitting here watching the video, though. That Celestleo's sitting there for a while doing nothing. Still doing nothing. Got Gorgons. Does nothing again. And then the Thunder deck had no outs to Celestleo. Nothing against Caleb, but that is a Frostfall deck without Earthquake in it, without Royal in it. There's literally 0 outs to Celestleo in that deck, except for like double Zeusing into Race to the Top, or some other shenanigans, or finding a way to get Stadium on board with an Arcolith and a ton of Thunder on it to attack. There was no out in that Thunder deck to Celestleo that it seemed like, and if there were Earthquakes or Royals in that Thunder Nexus deck, Caleb got extremely unlucky that he didn't draw them. Celestleo should be outable. I mean, in theory, the Celestleo player could be running like Divine Blessing and Apollo, and to protect Celestleo that way, but that does add more cards to the combo that you need Celestleo with, and you're adding more cards in your deck that aren't going to necessarily synergize with it. So that kind of hampers a little bit. So I don't want to make this too much longer. I don't think Celestleo is as cracked or crazy as people are making it out to be. I understand where they're coming from, because this card does look really nasty. Solar as an element, as a whole, is part of the argument as well, for sure. And I think part of that, again, kind of going back into how Frost was, is people looked at Frost and saying, oh, these cards in Frost are going to be crazy. These cards in Solar, yes, they're looking crazy, but part of it might just be because when you're looking at the Solar cards compared to base set, compared to a little bit of Frostfall as well, we're looking at like archetypes that are clearly being defined as a whole set in catch-up. So things just seem to be more coherent and synergistic in Solar than other elements, because we're not trying to piece things together in base set. Base set was all over the place for sure. Frostfall kind of merged things together a little bit more, and now Solar and Daybreak, we're looking and saying, oh, here's a Solar Nexus archetype that would work. Oh, there's a cow thing that can kind of slot into the Solar Nexus. Oh, this cow thing can also slot into the Celestleo stuff. There's this Foretell deck where we're manipulating the top of our deck for things as well. And that kind of makes the decks look more coherent and consistent, and I think is part of why people think Solar looks so powerful. Additionally, I want to say that if Solar wasn't good, and the entire set was around Solar, and there was not a single good Solar deck to play, that would make the set probably pretty miserable of an experience to actually open, because you're trying to open up this new element, you want to play these new cards, and all of a sudden none of them are playable because there's not a single Solar deck to play. It would have been awkward. So I understand the concern. I think it's warranted enough, but without proper tournament results and people adjusting their decks to things like Celestleo and some of the other cards in Daybreak, I don't think people understand the cards innately in that context yet until they start playtesting more. Especially, again, Elestrals are playtesting. People are just testing the cards before they pick up the set. Solar is still looking strong, don't get me wrong. But I think some of the commentary around Solar is missing the mark on a lot of things. And I just want to talk about Celestleo specifically on that. Just because I look at Celestleo just going, well, it gets Gorgons and you Earthquake it, or if it hits a couple things on my board and I just know it's coming, I Earthquake it or I Royal it away and then go back to doing whatever I was, and my opponent just lost like 2 to 3 to 4 cards set up to get Celestleo into play. So that's where I'm at with Celestleo. I just want to talk about it today. Just a little bit of commentary. Feel free to let me know what you guys think and why people are doom and glooming over Solar, etc. Obviously, the Divine Rune's looking really strong. Lustragon's looking pretty interesting. The cows are looking really quick and aggressive. So let me know below what you think. And I think this is a really interesting topic to just talk about and just discuss. And let me know what you think. I'll see you guys in the future.